we're gonna just the salmon fishing tip video, and what I want to talk about is some of the techniques that I use in these low water conditions. It looks like this fall we're in a drought cycle, and we're gonna be dealing. You can see all the beach right here on this pool. Usually the water's way up on the beach by now, so we're in very low water conditions. So I'm gonna do a few tips about how I deal with the salmon fishing, deal with the low water conditions, and how I set it up, and some of the flies. Some of the stuff doesn't change much. It's just a little bit about the presentations and water I get into. But I'm gonna kind of cover everything: the flies, the presentations, so how I set a rod up. And this is shot over a few days, so on some different parts of the river, some different pools, and some different conditions or situations, I should say. So I can kind of show a few of the techniques that I use in these low water conditions. So I hope you found it useful. Follow along, and maybe you'll pick up a little tip that'll help you this fall dealing with the skinny water we're going to have. Video. I want to take a few minutes here and talk about what I'm doing in this piece of water. So this is kind of what I would refer to as kind of classic run-to / pocket water fishing, where sometimes the fish will just be rolling right through this water, moving through there. So it'll come up, it'll sit in these little pockets, and they'll hold temporarily, then move on to that's how they would normally use this. But in low water, what will sometimes happen in this type of pocket water, these fish will come up and they'll sit in here a lot longer than you think. The reason is often in low water we also have warm water, and there's a lot of mechanical agitation, which means that they can mechanically put in a lot more oxygen. So sometimes sitting in there, for oxygen wise, it can be a lot more comfortable for the fish, surprisingly enough, even though it's skinny. So what you want to look for is any little trench slop, aka pocket. But you see how in here we got all the little bit of riffy runs, and a lot of times these fish will tuck in along those little riffs, or like those little bit of broken water in those pockets, and use that for overhead shelter and sit there. So if you know there's been some fish moving and you want to look around the pockets, you have water temperature, this is the type of water where you can sometimes find some fish holding surprisingly long. I've known in the past, I've seen where we've had bad or high water temperatures. You go into the pools, the fish are kind of groggy, they're not that active, and then you get into the pocket water and you find a piece of water that's 2.5, maybe lucky, hopefully even 3 feet deep, but generally right around that 2.5 foot mark, and you got some broken surface over the top, and those fish can get tucked in there and they'll just sit and enjoy that stuff. So what you'd want to do is get above it and just kind of drop your fly down in there with a little upstream bend and let it kind of drift and drop, and once it gets in there, just let that fly just gently swim through that pocket. And of course you're talking tight spots, so that'll be right in front of the fish, and they get in those pockets and they'll defend that pocket pretty jealously, so you can make a nice presentation in there. And if that fly looks alive and has a nice lifelike look, swim and drift to it, invariably that fish is going to be on it. So that's one of the nice things about pocket water. If they're there, you're going to get a quick positive feedback on a bite. But the biggest trick is not to spook those fish, because they are in skinny water, they are nervous. So we're talking a little longer cast. You kind of get above it, you just kind of get that drift or swing under control. You just kind of, with some line handling skills, drop that fly into the pocket, let it kind of drift in there, let the fly drop with the current, and then let it just kind of swim through the pool, that little pocket or micro pool. And if they're home, they'll let you know very quickly. So pocket water in low water conditions can be surprisingly productive, especially if you're having early season warm water temperature issues, or if sometimes even there's just so much pressure in those pools, these fish kind of like have had enough and they're just looking for a quiet spot, and they can just move into those little pockets where they're not being tethered by the fishing pressure. That's also a place to look at. The fishing pressure gets a little intense around these more traditionally deeper run areas where you can see concentrations of fish, the concentrations of fishermen, but generally those pockets above that could sometimes hold a fish or two and make a day for you. Okay, I just ran through this run here, fished it a little bit, and I was running a Skagit head and a floating tip. Now in these low conditions, Skagit's okay. Sometimes I'll fish through, some rods I'll leave Skagits on. But I do prefer to run Scandies. And the reason why I'm gonna switch to a Scandi, especially here, is out in this water here, there's a bunch of different currents that comes in. We got two flows meeting in. We got a back channel, and then we got a drop off of another one that comes in, and we got a bunch of odd currents. So I got to mend it, and especially in low water, you run them really light. I'm running long leaders, so line handling each becomes even more of a premium right now because I want to fish very light, so I don't anchor the bottom, obviously. But I want that fly to really swing in natural. The fish are going to be a little bit off and skittish, so my presentation has to be super spot on. With the Scandi being a little longer head, I can steer it through those goofy currents. Now the advantage of the Scandi is my line handling. The advantage of this is I can turn over a dump truck worth of inventory if I want to. They're all within the same relative casting range. It's just that this hits the water a lot lighter because we're in skinnier water. I need a much more delicate presentation, unlike what the Skagit will give us. Over this fast water, it's not that big of a deal, but everything helps in low water conditions. So I'm going to put a Scandi on, and that's going to probably stay on this rod until we're done with these low water conditions. And I'm going to just run about a 10-12 foot leader, a fluorocarbon leader. In fact, this leader's all chewed up. I got to fix it. I'm going to rerun this thing. I did run it with a black Raider bugger. I'm going to go back to probably an olive. The light is getting on the water, so I'm going to probably change up and just go much more of a lighter color fly, because I found sometimes in these light conditions, bright conditions, that the olive works a little bit better. Plus it's getting warmed up. At some point you might see me shed this. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. I'm going to refish this run. I did see a couple fish rolling in it. I'm going to go to a Scandi. I'm going to lighten up the color of my fly and see what that does for me. And also with Scandis, you can't turn over big honker intruders that we love to fly, big tube flies, rabbit stuff that we like. So we got to fish with smaller flies. In low water conditions, we're naturally fishing with smaller flies anyway, so it won't be a problem. So let me get this change done, and we'll get back to fishing. Okay, really quick. Like I said, I shifted this rod from a Scandi, from a Skagit to a Scandi setup. This is the advantage of running these rods with the running line and swapping the heads. It only took me a few minutes. It actually took me longer to fix the leader than it did to change the heads. Just taking the Skagit off, putting the Scandi on. I had it right in my gear bag, right with me. So it's a real advantage of running these modular lines and just running heads off the running line. You can make the adjustment in the field really easy, really fast. So I'm going to go and see if this makes a difference. Alright, I want to take a minute and talk about where I'm fishing on this run and why in these low water conditions. Now, generally the salmon are going to be forced to sit in places where they normally sit just because they got to be in the water. But they will get concentrated in certain spots. Now I'm going to kind of play with the camera and everything else here, and you'll look off my rod tip and you can see all this frothy water right up in here. That's kind of shallow, but as it drops down, and you can see where the rod tip is, it gets really deep down just right off the edge of this. So there's a sweet spot in here. And if you can, that right about here, I'm just kind of looking on the camera, folks, barely, right where the rod is swinging, it drops, but you notice that riffy surface? And that water is probably 3-4 feet deep right in there. So it's got some depth, it's got some ceiling. That's where the fish are going to congregate. Now I did see a few fish roll in there. They just didn't want to play with me. Oh well, go figure. However, then if you look way down in the back, you see that glassy water? Yes, there's some fish in that glassy water. There's fish in there, but I don't give them any time or effort. Because generally speaking, those fish are going to sit there. That sun's going to be on them like it is now. And that water's skinny, they're going to get a little nervous, and they're generally going to want to go forward and get under that overhead cover, that current, where they feel a lot more secure. Now the water temperatures are good today, so oxygen's not a problem, but we could very well, before this month is over, we're going to have some hot weather, in the head of these pools where that aeration is going to be very important. So those, right now these fish could be back in that little bit more deeper water that doesn't have such an aggressive ceiling on them. AK, they also got depth, which helps. So they're comfortable right there. So that's the type of water I'm going to concentrate in. I'm not going to worry about this really slick water like it's in front of me. I want to work that depth, and I want to work that depth that has a ceiling on it. So that's the type of water I'm looking for in these conditions. Alright, I want to just really go over quickly and tell you what I'm doing in this run. I tried a little higher in this run, then I just dropped down probably about 20-30 feet and just tried the tail end of this. If you got to the tail end, I don't need you to do such a big cast. So on the top end, I quite often, you just got to swing. And when I get to the further out and further down the pool I get, because of the angle I'm casting and the angle I'm fishing, you get more and more of a swing. So generally speaking, this time of the year, at this moment, I don't expect to get a lot of takes on a hard swing. So what I did is I moved down, and that way I could get a softer swing, and almost in some of this water I can almost dead drift it. So if you watch, I'm swinging sometimes, I'm dead drifting sometimes, and I'm fishing close, working my way back out and my way back in, mixing up the presentation between the swing and kind of a drifty swing, real slow, kind of a walk to fly down, kind of a sloppy dead drift. You know, let the woolly bugger come alive, let the woolly bugger do its thing. So just kind of cover that, because you just don't know. That fish may want a slower, softer presentation, might ignore a fast presentation. You just got to mix it up. And very often this time of year, you get one fish that really just wants a full-on, big-time swing. They'll just smack the snot out of it. The next fish will just almost sip it like a little brown trout in the spring creek. I'm sipping midgets. So you got to kind of mix those presentations up a little bit, especially when you don't have a lot of fish around. You want to give that fish there a really good chance and a really good look at the fly the way you hope they want to see that fly. Obviously we don't know, so you just got to keep mixing up the presentation. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, and I'll do that all through these different runs. I'll mix it up between the swings and the drifts. I'll talk more about it as we go along.
First.
Always do. Alright, and this particular run in here is a great run in that it can hold a lot of fish down through here. But the problem with this low water is when the water gets slow, obviously the top end's going to have a light current, then it gets pretty soft down below. And in these low water conditions, in a normal flow would have a great tongue of water coming through here, a nice speed, a nice clip. The fish will tuck under it like they normally do. But in these slow water conditions, yes, these fish they're still going to suspend a little bit in this pool. And sometimes low soft water, the fish will suspend quite a bit. So something to be mindful. If you're fishing deep and the fish that they're not getting them, try fishing a little higher up in the column. They do have a tendency in this softer water to suspend more because the water's comfortable higher up, and they'll sit there a little higher up. Usually what's happening in normal water flows, they got to get below that heavy tongue of water into that softer water. So these fish can be a little bit higher off the bottom sometimes. So keep that in mind in a lot of these pools. But if you'd watch my swing, the cast out and the swing is kind of slow. I'm still doing a normal layout, get the fly down. And as that swing, if you take note, comes through and you watch my hands, you'll see I'm starting to strip a little bit. Salmon, and when you find salmon in calm water, it'll be balled up. Sometimes they can be very susceptible to a very soft, slow, pulsy strip. And that's what I'm doing here. As that fly comes out of the faster water, I'm giving that slow pulse, soft strip, because sometimes they'll sit in that there, and that fly just kind of working through them, and you every once in a while want to swim up and eat it. And as you get into the tail end of the pool, because there's no current to really work a swing or a drift, sometimes you're left to just working the fly yourself mechanically, but you can cast it across and do it. Keep in mind, sometimes a size 2 in these low water conditions, when they're sitting in soft water, is not too big of a fly. In this case, I was running a 4, which is a little bit much for my Scandi setup, which I'll go over in a minute on this presentation, and I was stripping. The other thing is because everything's being really narrow, I got to get the fly down quick. I'm running a Scandi and just an old school, probably about a 10-12 foot leader. I think this leader right here is probably about 12 feet, fluorocarbon leader. This is a standard low water setup, and just a BB and my size 4 cone head was more than enough weight to get it down and get a nice clean swing, and then be able to have that fly just kind of do that pulsy strip on the end of the presentation. And one just rolled right there where I was fishing. Salmon are always salmon. Gonna do a little bit of discussion on the flies here that I use in these low water conditions. So I'm gonna be back to being a hand model. So everything's zoomed up here kind of tight so you can see what I'm looking at. You'll notice in here that there is some stuff that's, I got a fair amount of flash in them, and it's still bright. Yeah, these fish do like their bling. Even low water, they still like their bling. But however, some of these I might use like something like this in a deep water condition. Getting this on the camera here. It's got a lot of flash in, but if you get in some deeper, darker pockets, shade on the water, sometimes the flash will really help out. This is tied on a probably about a size 6. A lot of these are tied on like 6s, some size 4s. It does sound big, but the overall, what you want to take note on is, like here's a green butt, whatever, kind of a cross between a black bear and a skunk. I'll kind of get it, drop the thing down here over some white, you can see it. You know, a lot of chartreuse in it, a little bit of bright color in it, and it looks, even though it's on a 4, but if you take a look at the overall size of the fly, the length of the fly, it's not a big fly compared to what I normally use. So what I'm doing is I'm tying a lot of these on size 4s and 6 salmon hooks and getting the size down. Something like this little pink thing here, this is probably on a 4. It's kind of big. It looks kind of big in the wet fly universe. However, you see it on the top of the frame here. Overall, it's really not all that big, because even still I'm using size 4 and size 6 willy buggers. So we all know what willy buggers are. I do use a lot of willy buggers still with cones and beads. A lot of times with just a cone and the bead, as I mentioned before, it's all we need to get down. But I will go to a lot of these classic wet flies and start experimenting on them. Even here, sometimes those heavy wire hooks might be all the weight I need to get down, but I don't have to add much. So this is kind of a mix of the classic wets that I use. I just basically fish them in 4s and 6s. I will tie them a little blingy. Sometimes if it gets really bad, I'll tie them very sparse. These are more general purpose ties. Here's one that's been kind of banged around in here. It's pretty much like the last one I showed. And here's something a little bit smaller. This is more on a size 6 hook. Get that right where you can see it here. And it's got a little bit, it's not a lot of crystal flashing wings, just got some bright under stuff. Then it's just hackled over and wung over, and that kind of keeps that pop down. As you can tell, I'm near the road, so please excuse the traffic. So this is one group of flies that I use a little bit on. And if you take a look in here, I do have some chartreuse in here. Works good and very first in the morning. Early mornings, first light is a great choice. The oranges are fall favorites right here. And even these pink things. These two options are excellent for cohos. When the cohos get up, sometimes a little bit of color is good. If we have an early run of steelhead, for an example, we're still chasing steelhead in mid-October. Sometimes these would be really great choices. First light, working through the day would be these things. You know, basically different color, a little bit of flash mixed in or mixed under a halo of dark hackle and wing will kind of help shroud that down. And plus these things also got a nice buggy look to them. So that's kind of my wet fly mix that I use for low water conditions. Let me show you a couple other patterns. Kind of have to excuse the beat up look on these flies. They've been rolling around in my boxes for a little bit. But anyways, I wanted to show case this pattern right here and this pattern right here. They're basically the same thing. They're basically what I call hackle flies. You know, hackle tips. They got a silver tinsel underbody, then just collar and wound hackle. Really good thin profile fly. Works really good in these low conditions. These are actually tied on salmon flies, size 4 salmon flies. So understand, a size 4 is still not a big fly. I will do them in 6s also. Here's a classic, a lot of you, if you recognize it or not, a silver rat, classic Atlantic salmon fly. This takes a lot of fish in low water conditions for me. And just recently, shooting this particular video, but up on the fly tying section, boy, a lot of traffic along this access point. There's a, I just call it the low water salmon fly. I don't know what the name of it is or anything else, but it's a really producer. It's a badger hackle. Put my fingers behind so you can see the hackle a little bit. It's a light colored hackle. It's kind of hard to see white hackle on a white background. But it's here again, it's a really good low water condition fly. So these are basically the fly patterns I use. Now mind you, I said it several times, I do still stay with the woolly bugger pattern because they just work and you can't fish them wrong. But sometimes you got to have something a little bit more petite, and these are the classic flies that I'll go after. Anyways, I hope the flies help. I hope I made some sense. You could see the flies well. And yeah, this was an Italian video, and maybe down the road I'll put this one in a Italian video. Put in the comments if you'd like to see this in a Italian video. Maybe I'll get to it. Anyways, those are my flies. Found the video useful. It's time to get on with fishing. See you on the river, folks. Once again, be more videos coming, so as always, hit the subscribe button. See you on the water. This is Jay at JPEG Guides and Lost River Fishing. We are a year-round fly fishing catch and release guide service. We fish the Lake Ontario tributaries, and then during the spring and the summer we also fish the inland trout streams, classic dry fly fishing. During the heat of the summer, we will do the warm water fishing for bass and pike. If you're interested in any of our outings or have any questions, please feel free to email us at fish@lostriversfishing.com. Hope to hear from you, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.